Hey Weavers, this is Deborah from yarninnovations.com, and today I want to talk to you about how to twine. And there are two simple ways to twine, and I'm going to show you each one of those. I'm going to start by showing you these two projects. As you can see, this one's just basic stripes, and this one actually has a section of diagonals. By learning how to twine in two different directions, you can decide either to do just straight lines or diagonal ones. So let's take a look at how to twine. Just a note before you start twining that most twining is done from both ends toward the center. So you'll twine a little bit from the top and then turn the loom over if you want, and then you'll have a new top, and then kind of weave a little bit. You can keep turning it over if you want. You can weave from the bottom if you'd like. Some people prefer weaving from the bottom or from the top. Sometimes I weave from the top a little and the bottom and then kind of meet in the middle. The reason that you're kind of weaving toward the middle is a couple of reasons. One, it's really easy to twine down in this direction from the nails. It's hard to twine all the way to the nails. If you started at the top and twined all the way down here, these last rows would be very difficult because you're trying to go in a tiny space around the nails or pegs. So it's better to work toward the center, and also it keeps an even tension throughout your project. Instead of maybe you got tighter as you went and then it's really tight down at the bottom and then your rug doesn't quite lay the same. So if you work from both sides toward the center, you get a more even rug. I'm going to use two different colors just so it's more obvious what's happening here. To join two colors, you have a slit on the end of each one of these strips. Normally I fold it over and cut a little slip in here. I'm going to put one color underneath and the other one on top. The one that's on top, I'm going to find the end. I'm going to go under the old one and then under the top one, or the new one, depending on. I say old one because when you're adding a new strip, there's a old strip and a new one. Alright, so then I just pull tight. If you had rounded the edges, the knot would be a little less prominent. So you decide if you need to do that or not. Or let's take a look here. I'm going to start here where I have my slip knot. I start with a slip knot so I don't have a tail on my warp to weave in. You're going to weave around each one of those every row until you get to the knot, and then just weave around that as if it's one strand. You're going to weave around the tail too, and at the very end of your project you won't have to weave around your tail. Alright, I'm going to send one color to the back here. Your pole and your warp strand closest to the pole are considered one unit. So every time I say go around that last strand, you're going to go around the last strand and the pole. Here we go. So the two different ways to twine are twisting over or twisting under. And that is as basic as that. Most people show you twisting over, so I'm going to start by twisting over. The only difference in twisting over and under is the direction that the stitches lean. Here we go. Twisting over means the one that's trailing will twist over the one that's leading and then go under the next warp strand. Here we go. So now the blue went to the back and the yellow's in the front. So to twine, twisting over, I'm going to make the yellow go over and then under the next warp strand. I like to hold it like this. My thumb and first finger holds the trailing and my other fingers hold the leading. I twist my hand over and then it goes under the next warp strand. So after a little bit, you'll get some muscle memory. You're going to twist over. Remember, the trailing one is going over the leading one, and then it goes under the next warp strand. Trailing goes under the leading, goes to the next warp strand. Here we go. I'm going to twist over and under. Some people say that to themselves. Over, under, all the way across. Alright, when you get to the end, you just push these up as far as you can. Hold on to the warp strands and then push them up. You need to push them up, if possible, as close to these nails as possible, because when you pull it off, if it's lower, then you'll have these warp loops at the top. So let's talk about how you turn. Notice these stitches are all, I worked to the right, and the stitches are leaning to the right. When you twist over, working right, the stitches lean right. Here we go. You're going to do just the same. You're going to twist over and send the yellow to the back, and then blue is ready. Here we go. Now you're working back to the left, and it's the same process. You're going to twist over the trailing color, twist over the leading color, and then goes under the next warp strand. Trailing goes over leading, and then under the next warp strand. Again, I like to use my thumb and my first finger for the trailing color, and my other fingers for the leading color, and just twist my hand over, and then pull it under the next warp strand. Here we go. Twist over, under. Goes twist over, under. Now when you work to the left, when you twist over, the stitches are leaning toward the left. I'm going to do the last two stitches. And if you look at these stitches are leaning left, and then when you push them up close to the top, they actually make a V, because the first row was leaning to the right and the second row was leaning to the left, so they kind of make a V that points in this direction. That's called countertwining. Countertwining kind of brings a balance, and so your whole project kind of leaning in one direction, it kind of brings that balance, and it actually makes your corners of your projects to lay flat. If you do it so that all the projects stitches lean in the same direction, your corners may curl up a little bit. But that's how you get the diagonal look. Again, let's talk about how you turn. You turn by twisting over, sending the yellow to the back. And then you can continue to twist over and under. Okay? Now I'm going to talk about how you get these colors here. On this one, I used green for both strands at the very beginning, so it's just that green color. And then I cut and attached two whites, got a white row, and then I attached two greens, like I cut it and added green, and then, so that's how I got these white and green rows. And then right here, this is one green and one white, and I just alternated it through this whole middle section. Now when you twine or countertwine, you're going to twine for a little bit and then turn it over and twine for a little bit. I started with some twining at the bottom just to make it more stable, because sometimes on that first row these loops fall off, so I didn't want to bother with that during this demonstration. So that's how you get these stripes here. But let's talk about twining in the opposite direction, because once you can twine in the opposite direction, I'm going to leave this one on here, then you can get the diagonal shapes like this one here. But let's see how you twine under. You ready? Now for twining under, imagine it's just the opposite twist. Instead of twisting over, you're going to just twist under. So the one that's trailing goes under the lead one, and then under the next warp strand. Ready? Twisting under, and then goes under. So for this pattern, I like to say under, under, instead of under, over, under, under, under. And I learned this one first and found it to be faster, because while I was pulling this one out, I could already be moving this one under and under the next warp strand. So here we go. It goes under and under, 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 and then under. Let's get to the end so that we can turn. Just like before, you're going to twist under, goes under and around the pole and that last warp strand, and then you can work back. Let's go under. Let's take a look here. I worked to the right, but the stitches are leaning left, which is just like the row before, leaning left. So now I've already started a diagonal look here. All right, we're going to go work left. It goes under and under the next warp strand, under the lead strand and under the next warp strand. Okay. I'm just going to keep going under. You don't actually have to manually do this big old hand twist unless you want to. Goes under and under. A lot of times I find the under twist faster. All right, we have two left. Here we go. So I worked left, but my stitches are leaning to the right. So this is opposite of the twist over. But this is also counter twining. I twisted under when I worked to the right and twisted under when I worked left. So the stitches again point in opposite directions. That's counter twining. So if you do the same twist over, row after row, then you'll get stitches that lean this way. If you twist under right and left, then you get stitches that lean like this. And that's counter twining because they're not all in the same direction. So if you look here, I have a counter twining row and a counter twining row. It's just that the arrows are pointing in different directions. Now let's talk about if you want to get this diagonal look. In order to get the diagonal look, if you twist over to the right for this section, when you get to that section, you'll have to twist to the under to get here. So it's over, under, over, under. Let me show you what I mean. I twisted under in this direction. So if I twist over on the way back, they'll line up. So here we go. I'm going to twist over to start because I'm going to do a twist over row. Let's twist over and then twist over and twist over. I wonder if you can already see it. Can you see the stitches kind of lining up? They were pointing, now they're pointing to the right in both directions, twisting over, twisting over, twisting over. When I work to the right, I'm twisting over. I'm going to push these up. I'm going to work to the left and I want to twist under. So I'm going to twist under, twist under, go under. I'm going to go kind of quickly so that you can see just how they line up again. You already see that I got my diagonal line. When I worked to the left, I twisted under. When I worked to the right, I twisted over. And that caused all the stitches to go in the same direction. And because I have one of each color, they kind of line up one stitch after each other to make that nice diagonal. So let's talk about this right here. When I worked to the right, I twisted over to the middle. And then I twisted under here and turned around. Because I twisted under, I needed to twist over halfway and then under. And then over half, under half, over, under. And that made that V. And then I did that halfway down, and then I did the opposite. If I started with over for this half, and I wanted to get the opposite diagonal, then I start by going under, over, under, over, under, over. And that got the box or diamond look on this project. Okay? So when you're first twining, you should do counter twining. And if you want to change a color like a stripe, start with two of the same colors, or I fold it in half. Let me get a strand. If I'm just going to say I want blue, this is the beginning of my project. Let's see, let me put that on here. I'll say I'll fold my first strand in half, send half of it to the back and half of it to the front, and then I just start twining. And then it's just all going to be blue. The nice thing about twining is you don't see the warp strands except at the top if you used a different color. So if you look at this project here, I used light blue for my warp, and you only see that along the top. You won't see that here. If I didn't want to see that, then I should have warped my whole project in this cream color, and then the cream would be at the top and you wouldn't be able to tell very easily where the warp strands are. Okay, so you can use, nice thing about warping counter twining is that you can use whatever color that you want here, and it'll be hidden by your project. All my strips are cut to 1 1/4 inch for my warp and my weaving, and that's just the basics on how you twine. Always twine over for counter twining, or always twine under, or alternate under and over if you want to get diagonals. And that's the two basic ways to twine. Thank you for watching. Happy weaving.